Hi, everyone. Welcome to another Changing Conversation on SGS Live. I'm PJ Kwong, and we are using this SGS Live to talk about the way that the European Union, or EU, is moving towards a circular economy and new regulatory requirements focusing on the Ecodesign for Sustainable Products Regulation, or ESPR, where manufacturers will be required to design products with a focus on durability, reusability, repairability, and recyclability. Complementing this, transparency will be improved with the requirement for every product to have a digital product passport, or DPP. This will accompany the product along the complete supply chain, collecting information on materials, production processes, and sustainability to enable better decision-making by consumers and retailers. With the mandatory DPP, businesses will be required to provide full transparency along the supply chain, delivering verified data on environmental factors such as durability, repairability, recyclability, recycled content, greenhouse emission gases, and water consumption. There's obviously a lot to talk about, and as always, I am joined by expert guests. Today is no exception, and these two are from the Global Softlines realm, starting with SGS Global Technical Manager, Frank Kempe. Welcome, Frank.
Thanks a lot. Happy to be here.
Delighted to have you. And our next guest is Global Softlines expert who specializes in regulatory retailing requirements and quality testing. Valérie Cimetière. Welcome, Valérie.
Hello. Thank you for inviting me.
Lovely. Okay, well, let's get started because we have a lot of information to cover. So right off the top, I'm interested in your roles and how you got here. Frank, let's start with you.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm the Global Technical Manager, which means that I'm in the technical team, and I bridge in easy ways three areas. So the first one is really what is the regulatory landscape, what are industry trends from multi-stakeholder associations, so what is going on in the industry. Then the second one is to think about that within the SGS world. Do we have services? Don't we have them? Do we need them globally or locally? So depending on whatever is on the agenda. And then obviously, the third part is getting in touch with clients, being technical support over there, and see what's on their agenda.
So Valérie, what about you? Can you tell me about your experience and your role, please?
Yes, for sure. So as Frank, as I am a member of the global technical team, and so I am more specialized on physical tests rather than chemical, but with the same function and objectives, supporting clients and so on. Indeed, as I'm based in France, I am also in charge to follow French regulations and European work regarding the circular economy for textile products. And prior to SGS, so I joined SGS 14 years ago, and previously I was quality manager for two retailers, French retailers.
Lots of experience from both of you, that's for sure. So Valérie, let's start with you. Can you please explain how ESPR, or as I mentioned, Ecodesign for Sustainable Products Regulation, and DPP, or Digital Product Passport, are embedded in the regulatory landscape?
Yes, I think that we can assume that there is an environmental consciousness among all our activities and around the world. So we can see that a lot of regulation have been implemented. So in Europe, we will speak about REACH regulation. We have the Green Deal. We have also some new circular economy plan and so on. So within this purpose of environmental improvements, we could say that there is the ESPR is there to help products to be more eco-designed, to use less energy, to be more recyclable, and also made of more recycled products. And regarding the DPP, we know that the DPP will have to be, the information in will have to be confirmed. All are not defined yet, but we know that there is also a will to display the information to the consumers.
So, Frank, I want to come to you to talk about ESPR specifically. What is the recent status, and what is kind of the expected timeline?
Oh yeah, that's a whole big issue on the ESPR, because like Valérie mentioned, it's only one part of many initiatives and many actions which are going on in the EU. If we are talking about ESPR itself, it should be noted that it's already effective. So it's live since June of this year. In the EU, we normally differentiate between a regulation and a directive. If it's a directive, then member states need to implement them themselves via the next 2 years. But here we are talking about a regulation. So since June, it's live. So that's the first major point here. Nonetheless, we are talking about a kind of framework directive, framework regulation, which means it sets the stage for further activities, for further details, because ESPR covers each and every product category. And now details for specifics like textiles, like footwear, like accessories needs to be defined. And this is a little bit work in progress. And what we know is that an ESPR working plan is in the making, and it will be published in best in Q1 2025. So there we then have a lot of more specifics and more details of what's going on behind the curtain already.
You know, there's obviously a lot of different things that we have to consider. So I want to take a step back. And Valérie, I want to start with you about the key elements that make a product sustainable according to Ecodesign regulations. And then maybe, Frank, you can elaborate on the process of assessing a product's environmental impact through its life cycle.
Yes, so the European Commission has defined what would be an eco-designed product, and then an eco-designed product will be a product using less energy, which will be more resources efficient. Of course, the product has to use more and more recycled material, fibers and so on, and the product has also to be recyclable and then can be used again for the next steps. The product has to last longer and can be repairable as well. Of course, the carbon emission must be limited and reduced. And of course, starting with which a recyclable product and eco-design products must have no or limited substances to be able to be recycled the more easily and the safer possible for the consumer.
Okay, and Frank?
Yeah, picking up on that and how to assess an article, I think there are various steps which needs to be considered. So first we need to define certain points. And the first one is really, what is the scope of a product environmental footprint or product scoring? Because there are various differences. We can, for example, define from until cradle to gate, which means until the product is produced from a tier 1 factory, for example, until the shoe or a garment is ready. Or we can define cradle to grave, so which includes also the use phase from the end consumers and a durability aspect. And one simple example why that's important is if we consider the same supply chain, the same article, the same factories, everything the same, and then we end at the gate, that's fine. So basically we receive the same scorings. But if we go then beyond into the life cycle and the use phase of the end consumers, if one company is flying in the goods by air, for example, and the other ships it via sea, Obviously, there are differences in the scoring and in the environmental effects out of that. So that's why the scope itself is the first major point. The second one is we need to define the scheme. So what is the assessment behind that? There are various in market. We see a trend in two at the moment. So one is PCF. It's an official ISO behind that. It's product carbon footprint. So one receives a carbon equivalent of the article, or product environmental footprint. That's a lot of discussions going on there in the EU at the moment, and it's also linked to the ESPR. It seems that this will be the leading part within this regulation. So within the product and footprint, it's a different calculation behind that. So if those 2 points have been defined, then one needs to create transparency about the article to the supply chain for all the different stages which are affected. One needs to gather the data and do the calculation. For the data points, it's important to note that in best case, we have primary data, so real data from factories or from articles and materials which are included. If that's not available, then obviously we need to have secondary data based on databases or research papers to do the calculation at the end of the day. And then one receives the result or the scoring for one article, and in best case, one is doing that a little bit more to have comparison within their own product portfolio and see also hotspots. So what are the actions out of that? Because one doesn't want to have a scoring only, but you want to work with it.
I'm starting to get the picture. And my next question is actually a two-part question. The first part is about any penalties for non-compliance with Ecodesign regulations. So Valérie, let's start with you.
Yes, right now, regarding penalties, there are no, not for the moment. And so we are waiting for some legislative text, delegated acts, which have to be published by the European Commission, and then the European members states will have to designate the market surveillance authorities, and also they have to define what would be the penalties, which should be effective and proportionate to the uncompliance.
Frank, so I want to move on with you, and that is, I want to talk about maybe the future of Ecodesign for Sustainable Products regulations. What changes or advancements do you anticipate? Crystal ball time, time.
Yeah, that's really a good question. So I think I can foresee two major points here. So obviously the main idea of the ESPR is to raise the bar of articles, to make them more sustainable. And one important point out of that, with all the discussions about fast fashion, which is going on, or whether consumers really buy more sustainable products or not, because at the end of the day, maybe they only look at the prices, is that ESPR is relevant for all products within the EU. So whether they are produced here or imported. So it's really creating a level playing field for everybody. And then obviously linked to that, there is the full transparency out of the requirements which will be defined and the communication tools which will be implemented, like the DPP. So end consumers as well as business partners within the supply chain really have here key points to bring articles or bring products to the next level.
You know what? It's now time to get our audience involved, because we are capturing all kinds of interesting information here. And I'm kind of curious. So I'd love to survey my audience. Given our discussion today, are you or your team directly involved with the eco-design strategy of your business? Your answers could be number 1, yes. Number 2, no. Number 3, I'm not sure. I don't know much about this. So given our discussion, are you or your team directly involved with the eco-design strategy of your business? And while we're waiting for those answers to come in, I guess, as somebody who's very new to this whole concept, why is a strategy important? Do either one of you want to answer that for me while we're waiting for our audience to weigh in? Okay, Frank, I'm going to make you answer. How about that?
Yeah, I can give my first. Yeah, I can give my first thoughts on that. I
Great.
think to have a strategy on all those is really important, because basically the regulations cover the whole product portfolio. One can't say, oh, I've got only one article or one collection, and 80% of the whole product portfolio is not affected. So really one needs to zoom out and see the whole picture and how it's affecting the company and the way business is done.
You know what? Great thoughts. I'm going to, unless you would like to add anything, Valérie, I'm just going to go right to the audience and see what their responses are. So are they involved with the strategy for them and their team for their business? So the first answer is yes. Second is no. And number 3 is I'm not sure, or I don't know much about this. So let's take a look and see if we have any responses from our audience. And it takes sometimes people a little bit of time to sort of answer whether or not they know. Sometimes people are just tuning into these Changing Conversation on SGS Live because why? They're interesting. They're fascinating. And I always have fascinating guests. So we'll check back in on some answers a little bit later on. But for now, let's get back to the conversation. And I want to turn my attention specifically. Oh, look, Jerome says number 1. So it's a yes. Somebody else says number 2. Catherine is directly involved. Johannes as well. Wow, lots of people are really involved. Brian is not sure. And thank you very much for letting us know where you're at on this eco-design regulations journey. So, Frank, we're going to talk Digital Product Passport, or DPP. What I'm interested in knowing is what are the key components of this Digital Product Passport?
I think the Digital Product Passport has really 2 main points from a company perspective. So one is the product's technical performance. So really article information which are related to quality, durability, and sustainability credentials. So it really relates to the materials and everything on that. And the second component and the second important part is the transparency and traceability. Within the DPP, the idea is that an article is really broken down into the single materials and components, and that it's getting traced back. So there's always the nice idea from cotton farm to t-shirt, right? And this should maybe in future be displayed. And with those 2 ideas from transparency and traceability, as well as article and material information, added on that, then one can create repair activities and recycling capabilities. For example, if a brand has take-back schemes and stuff like that. So with that, everybody can create a whole story out of that. Those points are mainly now with the focus to the end consumer, but obviously that's B2B also. So not only will that be in digital labeling, but the DPP contains really specifics which are also business related.
Okay, Valérie, I want to know from you, what are the challenges that companies might face when they're trying to implement a digital product passport? And can you share some of the best practices?
Yes, for sure. I would say that the first one is to fight the fear that can inspire the regulation, because it could be felt like frightening. But I think that the challenge will be there to start working on this topic, because they have to be. And the first step could be to be aware of the supply chain, because normally companies know tier 1, tier 2, sometimes tier 3, and then we know that the regulation will ask more information, and then the supply chain will have to be managed more with more traceability and transparency. There is also one challenge to think how eco-design could the product be, and then it's also a new way of thinking for some companies to see how they can recycle, how they can use recycling materials and so on, which are not always in the first thought of the companies. And regarding but for this challenge, there are also some kind of best practices. And so I will say that once the fear we fight against the fear, I think that the company has to work step by step, and they don't need to do everything at once, because the first step will be probably the hardest one, but they don't have to do all the things in once. And the second point will also that within company, it is important also to include all the services and to make them working together and collaborate, because some data can be displayed in different services, and all the services will be concerned by the final purpose with the ESPR and the DPP.
You know, this is a fascinating topic, and I knew that our audience would be as interested in it as I am. And as always, we've got a wonderful global audience. So I want to take a moment to take just a peek at who's joined us today. And it's a very big and hearty welcome to one and all. We are so delighted that you've joined us today on Changing Conversation on SGS Live to talk about ESPR, or Ecodesign for Sustainable Products Regulation, and DPP, or Digital Product Passport, with my SGS experts, Frank Kempe and Valérie Cimetière. And I want to remind you that there will be a Q&A at the end of this interview segment. So feel free to drop your questions and comments in the chat. And please give us a cheery hello in our comment section. We'd love to know where everybody's from, and we're going to sprinkle those hellos in throughout our broadcast. But for the moment, I'm going to get back to our conversation. Frank, as far as DPP goes, is there a reference to other industries as benchmark, or is SL leading?
So this is really one of the main parts where we see that soft lines, so textiles, apparel, accessories, is not leading. So our industry has been defined within the priority group, but batteries are first. So they really already have it live, or are in the transition period into that. So if one really wants to see how an DPP may look like, what are ideas if can be transferred from another industry, then one needs to look into the electronics and batteries in specific. For our industry, for textiles and apparel, there is the timeline that DPP, as we have heard, contains so much of information that can be, so that it's expected that in 2027 there will be a light version. In 2030 there will be the next extension of that, and 2033 that's then the end goal. So that also gives an insight of the timelines and the implementation phases which are behind that.
So for you, Valérie, what do you see as the driving force of the strategy of brands? Regulations such as ESPR, or the idea of sustainability and going beyond?
I would say that regulation will be implemented and mandatory. So the brands will have to work on this topic, and according to the requirements from the regulation. And so they have to comply and answer to these requirements. The regulation will define the frame and also the direction for brands to implement their products within sustainability.
Okay, that kind of makes me think of something that I want to ask Frank about, and that is basically the number one recommendation to be ready for time once the open details are clarified and the regulation and requirements come into effect.
So I think, and there I can just echo what Valérie mentioned earlier, people should not wait until everything is finalized, because then they may be overwhelmed from the whole information, from the actions they need to take, and also the processes they need to adjust internally and with their business partners. So the clear recommendation would be to start, because we see clear trends. Like I mentioned earlier, there is the transparency and there is the article information. And those parts, yeah, there may be a little bit tweak here, a little bit tweak there, if final documents or final requirements will be clarified. But everybody should have article information on hand, right? You have your article, you have got your quality manuals, so you have got physical requirements out of that. And if then through the durability aspect, that will be prolonged to 5 washes, 10 washes, 15 washes, whatever, you already have an idea of where are you standing. So that's why the clear recommendation would be, don't wait until everything is final, because transparency and article data collection, data verification is definitely something on the agenda, and that will come.
Amazing. Well, you know what? We are going to head right into our Q&A, and thank you again for joining us, everybody, to talk on this changing conversation for SGS Live about eco-design regulations and DPP, or Digital Product Passport, with my expert guests, Frank Kempe and Valérie Cimetière. Okay. We're going to get into our Q&A now. Please feel free to leave questions and comments in the chat window below. But here's my first question, and Frank, it's for you. I want to know more about how can digital product passports support product innovation and development?
Oh, that's a tough one, but a good one. I think one of the drivers within innovation, obviously, is to go beyond what is status quo, obviously. And the digital product passport creates transparency and traceability in many ways. So if today a company, maybe only a trader, right, the supply chain is a black box. So with the upcoming regulations, they will have access to much more information, to much more data points, to much more hotspots, which they can then tackle. And this is intrinsically, obviously, for each company, because they get access to much more information and can take actions out of that. But I think there is the second component, which creates a kind of, I don't really want to call it competition, but things get comparable very easy, right? Through those transparency, through those additional information which are shared to the end consumers, but also between companies themselves. So if you collect all that and then you see, oh, one is better than the other, then obviously that can influence your decisions. And then companies start, I want to catch up with what is going on. And the ones who are leading maybe want to stay in a leading position, so they also need to drive further their innovation in sustainable area. So I think that's the driving force for innovation out of that.
Amazing. You know, Valérie, I want to bring it back around to SGS for the moment. I'd like to know how SGS can help brands and retailers face their challenges in this area.
Yes, so of course SGS can support companies who want to develop their sustainability and the eco-design product. I think that the first step, the first level of support that SGS can provide is the network we have around the world, because we can support company where they sell product, but also where they make them. So we can support quite everywhere, I would say so. And of course, we have several kind of services then which we can provide, like carbon solutions, like traceability for preferred materials. And of course, we can also provide many services regarding testing and durability protocols according to PEFCR, or according to French specific requirements and so on. So of course, we can support companies to work on that topic and comply with at the end with ESPR.
You know, we're getting some great questions and comments from our audience. So I'm going to go to an audience question right now. And that is, let me just, there we go. What if cost of repair and recycle increases the cost of actual product? Also, manufacturers prefer designs which cannot be modified or easily dismantled. Can either of you comment on that? Frank, can you maybe talk about the cost and what
Valérie,
that means?
you want to start? Because it's a little bit more related to quality.
Okay.
Yes. So what if the cost of repair and recycle increase the cost of actual products? So I think that we will have to find, that the company will have to find a balance between what could be useful for the consumer, because the purpose is also to get more durable products and to avoid textile waste, buying products which are not kept. So the purpose is really to get some products with more lifetime. And regarding the preference of design which cannot be modified or easily dismantled, I don't really know how to answer for that. Recycling sector is working on how to improve their way of sorting out and disassembling the product. So I think many progress and improvements are made about that, and there will be some more improvements in the coming months and years. So I don't know, Frank, if you have something to add regarding that.
I think I'm also going to jump in,
No,
Frank, before you talk, which is just about the fact that I think that what it means is there still may be some resistance to people making appropriate changes to really take into account sustainability in terms of products. So I think that that may be part of what Yassir is maybe asking. Frank, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. Obviously, if all the ideas and all the requirements from ESPR and DPP go live, the industry is not as it is today. So
Yes.
there is definitely a change in mindset, a change in products, a change in how people are doing business. And Valérie mentioned it, especially in the recycling area, we see it a lot today. Textile to textile recycling is super, super low. But there is so much innovation going on, and then maybe in 5 to 10 years, things get scaled up, and then also obviously the cost-value ratio may change.
You know what? I have one more question, and it's a short one for both of you because this time has just flown by. But I really want to know if each of you can give me just one thing only that companies can do right now to start to prepare. Valérie, you start, and Frank, can you wrap things up?
Only one advice.
One.
So I will say start ASAP. Because even if you have not all the information, if you have few of them, but the purpose is really to start now to be ready for the end of the implementation and when the law will enter into force.
Excellent. Frank?
I would say seek advice and get connected, because you are not alone. Everybody has those challenges on that table. So whether it's SGS with our service portfolio, and we can guide you through the process, but also associations have that. They create events, they collect the information from all their members and can guide through the process and say, please start here because we see X, Y, Z. And then other things get the priority maybe a little bit lower or for later. So really, you are not alone. Everybody faces those challenges. Seek advice, get connected.
You know what? And you're right. We are not alone. We've had the most amazing audience, and I would love to thank both of you for all of your insights. I'm talking to Valérie Cimetière and to Frank Kempe, and we've been talking about sustainable products regulations and digital product passport preparations. It's been a fascinating conversation. And I just want to say I'm so thankful for the audience for having been here, having been part of this great conversation. And if you want more information, just go to our website and click on this link or find this URL, and you will be able to access more information. In the meantime, I'm PJ Kwong, and thank you for joining us, and bye for now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.